Welcome to the first. You have a story. If you look back on your life, you've done things for the first time that no one in your family, in your town, in the country has done. This is Dr. Sandi. You have unknowingly paved the way for others without knowing it or even acknowledging it. This is where you tell your story so that those who come after you can walk in your footsteps to build their own firsts. Hey everybody, welcome Allan Berger. What makes Allan the man he is today? Allan is a business architect and strategist who dispenses advice to establish successful companies. What gave Allan his drive to achieve success? His family are first generation Americans who could not afford to send him to college. His family instilled the value of education, and Allan became the first in his family to graduate with not just his undergrad from Rutgers University, but is still the only one in his family, including his children, to graduate from business school. Allan accomplished another family first when he went into the military during the Vietnam draft. Today, Allan uses the leadership skills and attention to detail that he learned in the Army to advise other small business owners at the Morris County Chamber of Commerce in New Jersey. He also advises them at SCORE, which is a nonprofit volunteer organization that counsels business owners. Welcome, Allan. Today I'm speaking to Allan Berger. And Allan is a past member of my advisory board when I had my company Consultants to Go. I want to welcome him today so we can talk about his first. Welcome, Allan.
Thank you, Sandi. It's a pleasure to continue to work with you on building the new business.
Yes,
Because
thank you
one of
so
the things
much.
I love doing is helping people succeed.
And you're good at it.
Thank you.
Certainly, I can attest to that. So I wanted to talk about you today. And as you know, this podcast is called The First. And the reason I had that, Allan, was because I need to understand the wins that the everyday person is having in their lives. What are they doing that's the first in their lives that can either be handed down to generations or for someone to look at and say, you know, Allan did this and therefore I know I can do it, right? And when you completed your form, you said you were the first to complete college.
Yep, I was.
Let's
And
talk about that.
in my immediate family, I thought about it afterwards, and there were folks in my extended family who had been to college, but in my immediate family, I was the first to complete college. And
Which college did you go to?
Rutgers.
Oh, nice. I love Rutgers. And was that a local college for you, or did you go away?
No, actually, it was local for me because it was the Newark branch of it, and I wanted to go away but couldn't because at that time I wanted to go to the business school, and the
Okay.
business school was only in Newark.
Ah,
So as a consequence, instead of going away, I wound up commuting.
I was a commuter too, so
Yeah,
in,
and and when I think about my kids, here's a funny story that goes along with it. My wife once said to me, "How come you don't know how to do laundry?" And I thought about it, and she says, "Your kids all know." And then I realized, you know what? Since I was a commuter, I never did my own laundry. My kids all went away to school. They
That's
were forced to do their own laundry.
interesting because I guess you do learn. You're forced to learn things when you go away,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And when we're at home, you would think it's the reverse. Like if you're at home, your parents teach you how to do it instead of doing it
Right.
for you. But we do prepare them to go away to college.
Right. So, again, it's ironic. And then I was certainly the first to go to graduate school. And in fact, quite frankly, even though all my kids have completed undergraduate, none of them gone to graduate school. None of them needed to go to grad school.
So what was it in your family that prevented people from going on to college or to grad school? And what made you succeed and broke the mold? What do you think that is?
Well, I think it was based upon the fact that my parents were first generation Americans. Their parents were immigrants. And although they may have wanted to go to college and probably had the acumen to go to college, they didn't have the finances to go to college. And so, in what they decided as parents was to make sure that their children got the opportunity to go to college. And I see Sandy nodding her head, so I got to believe
It's
that's
such an
pretty similar.
it's such an immigrant story,
Yes,
right?
it is.
And when I started talking to you, I have these series, life series, business series, immigrant series. And it's funny how many of the stories I want to make an immigrant series because every time I speak to someone and they say the same thing, I was the first in the family to go to college. 99% of the times they're immigrants or first generation or second generation immigrants. And so that plays such a big role, not just in America, but in our individual lives, coming from it. We see it from a different perspective.
And I would agree. And I use that every day in my practice. I was mentoring a young CPA, and I said, who was wanted to hire his first employee. And I said to him, why don't you take a look at who are your first generation immigrants today? Because they are motivated in a way
Yes,
that succeeding generations aren't.
correct.
Because they're early in their American experience, they have a motivation to succeed,
Yes,
and they will become great employees because they want to make it in this new business, in this new economy.
it is so true. It is so true. My mom came to this country first, and I tell this story all the time because I don't think I could have done it. She worked 3 jobs. And her sole purpose for us was so that we would go to great schools. And she worked those 3 jobs because she wanted us to be in a good school district.
Right.
Didn't have the money for private school. So she wanted to be in a great school district that we would get a good education and that we had the chance to go on to college because we had a good education. And so I'm telling you, I don't know if I would be working 3 jobs like round the clock every day without vacation because that's what she wanted for her kids. And in turn, I have to say, I don't know if you did, but I felt a little guilty if I didn't live up to that.
And that's true. And you're living up to it to this day. You
Yes.
have a motivation to succeed that is based on what you saw your mother going through to succeed to what you wanted to accomplish.
Yes. And her success is so different. It's so different from my success, right?
Correct.
And I call her a success where the average man, again, we're talking about everyday people, the average person wouldn't call her a success because she was a union worker, you know, low paying piecework job in the garment district. And she was an aide on the weekends. And so if you're looking at, the millionaires, this is who we look up to today, right? Who's making $1 billion and who's making all this money. But in a very quiet way, she made do, and even better than made do, she saved enough money for us to do the things we needed to do. And for
Correct.
me, that's a big success because it was handed down like your parents is handing down that work ethic to you, right? Like, this is what you need to do. I'm doing my part, and it's up to you to do your part.
Right. Right. And I saw my dad work full time, 7 days a week, and what he did. And I saw my mom going to her job because even at that point, they knew that they needed both incomes in order for me and my younger sibling to have the the financial wherewithal to go to the next level.
Yes, yes.
So it's very similar between us.
It's very similar. I've spoken to at least 4 or 5 people now, different countries. And when I start off and I say this, it comes back to being an immigrant in this country and that drive for success. And so that's amazing. I have to start doing a whole immigrant.
Well, we'll give you something else to do. Like you don't have enough.
But it's a foundational thing, and I really appreciate having that background.
Right.
And it's not understood either, Allan. I don't think non-immigrants or people who are born, either born in this country several generations down.
Correct.
Because I know the kids the next generation down don't have the same mentality as I do. I mean, they have drive because they kind of saw that and saw how hard we work, and they think you're supposed to work that hard. But I wouldn't say on their own, they would just say, I want to do this. And they went to college. They went away to college. They had all the stuff we didn't have, right?
But what I find in younger generations is that because of the succeeding generation having success and trying to apply it to the next generation, in many cases, they are enabling behavior that's counterproductive over the long haul.
Yes.
And we see that when kids come home after college, right? And total no motivation to go out and get a job. Great, I'll go back to my room and I'll be happy. Oh, I hate it here, but by the way, all my meals come. Hello. But the bottom line to it, reality is they've enabled that behavior.
We have.
And so, and I see, so, when I have conversations with clients or prospects, I always try to understand where, I've said this to you before, I've become an amateur psychologist. We have to understand their motivations.
Yes.
And it gives me clues in terms of how to best, what's the word I want to use? Connect is the word. How best to connect with them, because if we can connect on a level the way you and I connected years ago,
right?
And I understand your motivations, and we understand each other's strengths. It just makes that bond so much more effective.
But as you said, we raise them with these expectations, right? So I know the next generation down is used to taking nice vacations every year, and they had a passport from they were, born literally as babies, because we were going on vacation and taking them. And so they got used to that. They think that's the norm because they don't remember a time when there was no such thing as a vacation. You were just thankful you got off from school. And so we made that the norm for them. So now we're expecting them to do something different, but we didn't teach them that.
And you're absolutely right. And I have the vantage point of having 3 children, all married. And the influences of the spouse, although my 3 kids all had a common background, their spouses were completely different. And because they're completely different, it's very interesting to observe how my grandchildren are being raised differently.
Yeah.
You will enjoy that in the future. I'm there now.
The next generation is not even thinking about getting married. They're all like, married, what?
Right.
So that would be a little wild.
I may have told you before, all 3 of my kids got married within 18 months.
Wow, that's a lot.
It sure is.
That's
And when they get married in that quick succession, you can't enjoy it. You just go from one to the
from one
other.
to the other. That's true. That's true. So, do you think your family acknowledged when you did your degree? You went to college, you went to graduate school. How did they acknowledge it, or does it just it's just normal for them and they don't even think about it?
When you say family, are you talking about my immediate family or my?
And your mom,
Yeah.
your
Oh,
parents,
my
your
yeah.
wife, your
Okay. Yeah.
children, like, do they really, are they proud of you for doing that, or it's just par for the course? I
Well,
got
I
that.
never asked my kid, but I do know that my parents, like yours, were very motivated to say that their children, my generation, had to go to college because that was the only way they could get ahead. They saw that we could
Right,
get ahead now. And my wife and I had the same expectation with our children.
right.
The interesting thing about it is as the generations evolve, how they get education, as you know now with a doctorate, how they acquire that education can be very different than the way we acquire that education.
Correct.
Our model was okay, you go away to college or you go to college, you sit through lectures, you do all your homework. In my generation, we didn't, it was all handwritten because we didn't have computers. Today,
I
you
had a
know,
typewriter at least.
right, that's what I had too. So, the bottom line is this generation, completely different set of tools.
Yeah.
And thank you COVID, but whatever, the ability for folks to utilize those online tools has been accelerated.
Ah, amazingly so.
And so our observation is, in order for us to be current, we need to use those tools. We need to understand how they're used. I
Yes.
would hate to be a parent today, but I know the parents have to worry about things we never worried about. Like, okay, are my kids prohibited from getting on certain websites? Are they going to download something that's going to screw up the computers?
And not even that essential, Alan. There are parents who don't know how to use a computer. And now with COVID, their kids were working from home and they didn't know how to help those kids. I was just watching this talk TV show about that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
those kids are going to be left behind
absolutely.
because I don't know if they're physically going to keep them in the same grade or they're going to put them in let's say you were in fifth grade and now you didn't acquire all the knowledge you needed to pass your fourth grade class, right? Are we going to put them into fifth grade with that lack of knowledge, or are we going to put them into fifth grade and supplement what they needed to know, which they're working twice harder?
Which is kind of interesting because when we think back to not so many years ago, when especially as I'm acquainted with the New York City school system and the concept of no kid left behind and changing the standards, lowering the standards because of the with the issues related to either the social background they came from or their um, uh, socioeconomic position in life. Now you add the technology component to it. We
Yes,
know is something that is essential
yes.
going forward. It just adds another layer to what you just said.
I gave last year to the shelters because technology in the shelters, if you're homeless, they have a basic level where you can't even, the speed is like the lowest speed, right? And it only comes on certain time of the day. You have none at night. It's not all day. So if a child that's staying in the shelter needs to get on class, You know where their parents take them? Out to the park, rain or shine, because a lot of the parks have internet connection and they can't get it at the shelters. So there were a lot of people with umbrellas sitting with their kids out in the park trying to connect on the internet.
And your observation of that is fascinating because I have a very good friend of mine who ran leadership development at Honeywell, and and when we would meet socially, he would say, "So what's new in leadership development?" And I'd say, "Nothing is new. What's new is the way in which it's delivered."
Yes.
And you're pointing to the very same thing here about it doesn't matter whether it's leadership or any other aspect of education. It is fundamentally changing. And what I find interesting is what I've heard about some of the adaptations that some of the school districts have made, that the colleges are not up to the same level of expertise
Correct.
to be able to implement as these kids get out of high school
Yes.
what they're comfortable with.
Correct.
So I see this as an ongoing challenge, and going back to the way education is delivered today, most, or I should say most, but many colleges are under a financial stress they never had before.
Absolutely.
And I perceive that there's going to be some fundamental changes and a lot of closures like there were years ago, because the model that they use to attract students and underwrite the infrastructure that the colleges need
Has to change.
completely changed.
Has to change. And
And,
there are kids who are learning better. So this is I've been reading up a lot on this. It's funny how we segued into education from this, but it's such a big part of our everyday. I was reading that the kids who are quiet and who are cerebral are excelling in the work from home environment because they're not social creatures. And when they're away at school, they're forced into an environment that they don't like and it's not natural to them. So they are thriving at home. Now, if the colleges want them to come back on campus, some of them don't want to go back because they're doing so well from home. Is the college now going to have to support a hybrid environment of both in person and from home?
and I think the answer is already in practice. COVID forced it.
Yes, yes,
And the interesting thing about it is I have a niece and a nephew, great niece and nephew, who she's a senior at Cornell and he's in a postdoc program at Stony Brook. They were overseas for 4 months
and
and
couldn't get back.
couldn't get back because they were overseas. But guess what? They were keeping up with their schoolwork because they had the ability
Yeah.
to communicate, use technology to communicate
The whole paradigm is shifted as to
permanently.
how we do,
Yeah,
how we do
yeah.
business, how we work, how we learn, and the learning is a big piece of it too. How we learn.
And your podcasts are an excellent example of that because what you're sharing with your audience is, okay, this is really interesting information. When am I capable of listening to it?
Yeah.
And the podcast gives them the technological option of doing it when they choose.
Yeah.
And so again, another piece of the evolution of technology. They could do it in the car, they could do it at home while they're relaxing, and they're acquiring knowledge and education to help them better understand two things: themselves and the people who work for them.
Yes.
And
So,
I applaud your thought process behind this. And I
no,
don't
thank
think you
you.
needed to get the PhD to do this.
No, this has nothing to do with that. But it does help me in thinking through things, having that. It's just a different way of thinking.
Yeah,
So you went on to the military.
I did.
Did
And it
you
was
go
during
right
the
after school?
it was during the Vietnam era.
Did you were you in college first and then went
I was
to
already out of college, working part-time and going to graduate school.
when Vietnam happened?
But the draft was in play because it was a very different time than it is today. And I was the first in my immediate family to go into military service.
And what branch were you in?
Army.
And where were you deployed? Where did you go?
Well, initially I thought when I was that I would I had the option of going to officer candidate school because I was a college graduate.
College grad, right?
Okay. When I got to officer candidate school, because I had a business degree, I was under the impression when I went through the recruiting process that I would be put in an officer candidate school, which would help me be a better apply my business school training to
Right.
the military.
And what
Guess what?
happened?
Wrong.
What
We
was
don't need those people. We just need people. We need people to be lieutenants going in the bush in Vietnam.
yeah.
That's where you're going.
Oh, my husband has a similar story about drafting in Vietnam. But my sister, who's younger and should know better, also has the story of she bought into, remember they used to say, join the army and see the world?
Yep.
And she thought if she joined the army, we were not in war or anything.
Right,
It was, a cold, semi-cold war, lukewarm war.
right.
And they had this big campaign, join the army and see the world.
I
And
recall.
she came home, third year in college. She comes home and says, guess what? I joined the army because I could see the world and get an education for free. And Desert Storm started, I think maybe a day or two after she did basic training and graduated. And so she went straight from training to like Iraq or Afghanistan.
Right. Yeah.
So if you buy into that, her husband's a recruiter, so I should not dispel that the army is still a good place for people,
Now,
especially people without options.
but here's what it did. What it did for me. The Army taught me leadership skills. It taught me leadership skills, and it taught me about attention to detail,
Right.
which are life skills that I have applied to this day. And those I've incorporated into my practice on a regular basis because I understand and I've gone through the training to learn how to be a leader.
Yes.
Thank you to the US government.
And it takes a lot for you to actually have people believe you and follow you. And in the army, as I said to Larry, they could be following you to their death,
Correct.
right? And
Correct.
you still have to give them the motivation to get behind you or to be a team player. Take one for the team, right?
Right.
This is basically what you're saying to them. You know, you might not come back. We're going out today. And you, Allan, might be one of the ones who don't come back.
And it also taught me the value of the team, that the team doesn't only consist of people who look like you.
Yeah.
and do the things that you do well.
Yes, yes.
The team has to be inclusive of a whole bunch of different skills that need to be applied to the mission.
Yes.
The same in business. As you grow beyond a solopreneur, you need to assemble a team. And that team has to be able to both be led, motivated, and also judged by their expertise. The leader.
And now I'm, with all the diversity and equity and inclusion stuff, there is value in having a diverse team.
Extreme value. Extreme value. And that's really come to that value proposition has hit big corporations within the last 10 years.
Yes.
It became a forefront of a major issue this year.
Yes, it has, and it's been a long time coming. I actually have to say that.
And I'm not convinced it's over yet.
Someone put a post up about, the angry Black woman. As a lot of Black American or just Black women are used to be seen and still are seen sometimes in the corporate as the angry Black woman. And I said, yes, why wouldn't we be angry? When I was in corporate, there was no diversity, there was no equity, and there was no inclusion. Why would I be smiling? And if you talked out about it, you either got let go because you're not a team player, right? You're pushing them to do things they're not comfortable with doing. Or you are loud. And I'm like, yes, I was loud because I spoke out about it. I didn't keep quiet. So then you're labeled loud.
And now the more progressive companies have set up special interest groups.
Yes.
That represent the various ethnic and not only ethnic, but it depends on the background of the individual.
I mean, in corporate we had all the groups, but you really felt like they were just paying lip service. So yes, we have a group. Yes, we have a group, and it's a big PR thing to have the group. Now it's not, so it's really, you must have it and you must listen to the people in these particular groups.
Sandi, let's stop right for a second, okay? I've got a hard stop at 2:30.
Okay.
All right, so I just wanted to make sure that that we cover whatever else you want to cover in that period of time, or set up another session to continue it.
No. We can certainly finish. I'll tell you when I'm starting back.
Okay, great.
Those were the three things you had: was college, post-grad, and military.
Did they fit in the way you wanted them to?
Yes. I have two more questions, and I think a couple more questions.
Let's do it.
Okay, so start. So Allan, we talked about, you're being the first in college, you're being the first post-grad, and being in the military. What are some of the pitfalls you see in being the first in those categories? What did you make mistakes, or tell me a little about that?
I think it was the lack of understanding from the rest of the family who had not had that shared experience. There was a lot of internal education for them to understand why I was doing what I was doing in the way I was doing it. Because it was a different experience than they had at the same time, in the same time of their life.
So did they understand? Did you go to work in the corporate world while they were more entrepreneurial and working? Was that a big difference to them?
I think very definitely it was a big difference for them. The other key factor was that I remember my sister-in-law saying to my mother-in-law saying to my sister-in-law when my wife and I got married, and she was an immigrant from Germany, my mother-in-law. And she said to my sister-in-law, I don't know if Allan can make a living in computers, be able to support my daughter. Well, we know that that over time has changed dramatically.
That's so funny. My husband Larry also left and went into computers, and he had the same thing. Like, why weren't you joining the union? You know, that's a sure money.
Right,
This computer thing, nobody knows how to do.
right, right. So, that explanation for them, it was so foreign from their experience that they had no idea how people could make money.
Doing that. Were there people who made money with their hands? That's what my grandmother used.
My father-in-law owned a butcher shop.
Yeah, they're hardworking people, and you know. And I said this before already. My grandmother always told me, if you know how to turn your hand, which means use your hand to do things, you'll always have a job. And so even if you're a computer guy, you know, learn how to fix the computer
Right.
because that computer is going to break down. And so I call them hands people because
I
that's
respect
what
where you're
we
coming
learn.
from. Yep.
Yes, definitely. So what were some of the good things? What were some of the joyful things of being the first in your
Some of it was the fact that I attained a level of success that was far greater than my parents had ever seen. I was able to afford a bigger house.
right?
I was able to afford things in life that they, at an earlier period in time, than they could have.
And they worked harder.
And so, I was able to go places, do things, see things that they had hoped to do, but were not able to do because financially they didn't have the resources.
Were you able to help them to make some of those dreams come true?
Yes. And that was a labor of love.
Yes, that's where some of the joy is.
Right. And that's the joy of giving
Yes,
because we recognized the sacrifices they made.
yes,
And so this was the giving back.
yes.
And I see you nodding the same way.
Oh yes, oh yes. You know,
So,
it's
you
the
know,
same story, different
yeah,
person.
I changed the names, but the evolution of the story is pretty similar.
Yeah.
Pretty similar.
I mean, I do keep some of the things that I call them immigrant mentality, like watching your money, right? Immigrants know how to make $10 out of 10 cents. We know how to squeeze that dollar.
Yes, we
And
do.
I still have that. My mom taught me that because I watched her, deciding which bill to pay and when to pay it and what you
Right,
guys need shoes on top of that. You want clothes and shoes on top of these bills. And she made it happen. And we learned how to make it happen.
right.
So it's not
Good.
all bad.
So I think that these are, lessons learned that, as your folks who are listening to these podcasts can take away some of this experience, hopefully, and use it in their own way to connect some of the dots they may not understand.
And do you see the impact on the next generation, Alan? Do you think you
Oh,
personally
absolutely,
having
because I have the next generation in the family. Now my kids are all successful. I don't have to worry about their livelihood.
right, right.
So at this point, I'm watching my grandchildren and watching how their parents are instilling in them some of the same attributes and attitudes that we taught the children, our children.
So some of it did stick.
Oh yeah, some of it did stick.
They have their own little ways, but some of it
However,
did
This goes back to the influence of the spouse. They
Yeah,
have learned how they have to adapt.
correct. Ah, interesting.
So,
Well, thank you, Alan. I appreciate that. I appreciate having you on as always. And I'll let you go to your next.
let me know what I can do to help. You have a
All
wonderful
righty.
day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
This is Dr. Sandi. Thank you so much for sharing your journey on the first, where no two stories are alike, even if the circumstances are similar. Let this discussion serve as inspiration for others to show what's possible, and more importantly, to produce seconds and thirds.